Tell us where we are, Dad?
What's that?
You want to say where we are?
Yeah, we're standing at the family plot, commemorating and thinking of our past and what it means to what we are today. As for myself, I'm a little chagrined about my nuclear family. They're all not here to share my current joys and problems and theirs, and all doing things together, feeling things together, planning things together. It's all gone now for many, many years. Of course, I enjoy my current family and all its branches and beauties. But deep in the heart, the little boy in me still longs for being part of this group. And I miss them.
What was your dad like?
My dad was, well, I've never thought of the question that way, so I may have to struggle with a response. He was tall, slim, good looking, and I thought very strong man. He took me to so-called camp. It was called Camp Nishkadaiget, which in Jewish means don't worry. Checking in there meant that they handed you a mattress and pillows, and we had our suitcases. And I remember I felt my father was such a strong guy. He carried all this stuff, which overloaded him and our suitcase. And it was a steep hill. The whole thing was built on hills, on land that couldn't be used for anything. And that's one of my early impressions of him, as being a strong guy. I always enjoyed any time we had together, the two of us, which wasn't much. But if I'd catch him shaving Sunday, and I would go in and start a political argument with him, so that I'd have something to talk to him about.
Why don't you talk a little bit about your mother? What kind of woman was she, and what are your remembrances of her?
Well, of course, they're very strong memories, because going backwards, I remember how deeply, deeply I was hurt. I can't find the words for the depth of anguish when she died at the early age of 53, when I was just a young man and had just recently established my practice. I had not started a family or anything. I was still trying to find my own way and meaning in life. And she was struck with cancer. She suffered greatly. She was the kind who expressed her suffering and demanded attention. And one of the severe memories I have is her grabbing hold of me and saying, Bernard, Bernard, save me, save me. We wanted the letter simple, you know.
This was after your mom died? All this was set up?
Yes, all of this had to be done within that short period of time. And I think my father and I hardly attended our businesses. We just sat home, commiserated together, and busied ourselves with plans. I will say that from this event, one of the positive things that sometimes comes out of tragic events is my father and I got very, very close. This came from Vermont, one piece of granite, and we designed the thing. We had not been that close because of both of us being devoted to our work, and he especially necessarily working many years of my life, 7 days a week. We got very close, planned a lot of things together and shared inner thoughts and everything. A very important part of my life.
My mother and father each came from Russia, each from one of these little shtetls, one of these little towns that were where the Jews congregated were their own little society. All of the shtetls there, the Jews were one very close-knit group. My mother had been in one that experienced the kind of anti-Semitism you see in Fiddler on the Roof. The Tsar's representatives ran the order and also created pogroms, where they came and fired down the houses and raped the women if they could. It was from that background that each family would send their very best first.
Each of them were one of a large family of 12 or 13 siblings, and all the resources of these poor families were concentrated to create hopefully a better life for one of them. And my parents were the one of each chosen to accomplish this.
Each of them traveled about 5,000 miles across Europe and across the Atlantic by themselves as teenagers.
In the lower holds of these crude ships with a minimum of funds to arrive in Ellis Island.
And arrived here to the home of some relative. With my mother, soon thereafter, her relative got killed in an elevator accident. The wife of the relative was mean to her. My mother didn't want to stay there in that home and went to Harlem, which at that time was a Jewish place for immigrants, and knocked on her second or third door, which happened to be opened by a person who ended up being my stand-in for grandmother, Mrs. Joseph Becker. She welcomed her in, made room in her kitchen for my mother to sleep in and live with them. My father's uncle ran a coal delivery business. My father was assigned to get up 4 o'clock in the morning, load the wagons with coal, and then help drive the coal wagons for delivery. He too was unhappy in those circumstances and went and somehow independently established himself.
Speaking only Russian and Yiddish, opened up a little store, I don't know with what resources, down near the Bowery, where most of his customers were Chinese immigrants who also did not speak English, nor Yiddish nor Russian. And in this tiny little store, he found a way to begin to make himself a living and support himself. There were at the time immigrant groups who met for the sake of finding people with common backgrounds. And it was there that my mother and father met. My father courted my mother and a marriage followed.
We lived in Brooklyn our first 2 years before Saul was born. And I was somewhere between 2 and 3 years old. And suddenly my mother turns out the lights and says, shh.
The landlord was knocking on a door looking for overdue rent, and we didn't have it. And my mother wanted to pretend that we weren't home.
And then my father, in spite of all these hardships, helped bring over my mother's sister, his wife's sister, Bessie.
And became a permanent member of our household until her marriage many, many years later.
And I would go around saying, Aunt Bessie talks funny. She only spoke Yiddish or Russian.
Bessie saw my mother put out out 2 empty bottles at night, and in the morning find 2 bottles filled with milk. She wanted an explanation of how they brought the cow up the stairs and was milked outside the door. That's the kind of small town that was their origin. When Bessie came over in the early 20s, she brought with her the 2 sons of this sister who had died, Leonard and Marvin Rosenberg. One by one, they each ran away from their father's home and came to live in my parents' home. And I, with my 2 brothers, also had Lenny and Marvin, the 2 sons of this deceased sister, all in one tiny bedroom living at the same time.
Eventually, because my father's job was in the Bronx, we moved to the Bronx. 817 East 175th Street, a 2-bedroom apartment on the first floor, that is the floor above this, what we used to call the stoop, a line of stairs into it. And that's where I grew up and my brothers were born.
A little over 3 years apart from each other. Saul had such innate, great intellectual qualities that they showed up at an early age. In high school, he was a chess champion. In college, he was a chess champion. Later on, when he went into science, he earned his PhD from prestigious graduate schools and also got prestigious appointments as a professor at Cornell Medical School. During World War II, he did research for NASA in the effort to win the war. And his brilliance of mind even came out in games. He took up bridge and became an international grandmaster, getting such a great grasp on it that they achieved the highest levels of achievement in it. Morty never found himself. He saw his 2 older brothers on their roads to success. I had opened my practice and it was going well. Saul was getting great distinctions in the academic area. This is my assumption. He wanted to make the one big leap into our field or over us. And he wanted to do that in a financial way. He got my father and I to support him, to give him enough money to buy the last 5 years of the daily racing form and to rent the use of an IBM machine. In those days, the IBM machines used these little manila cards with punch-outs. And he spent a year gathering statistics from the daily racing forms and devising, with the help of the computer, what he considered a perfect system to make money. Around the racetracks, he'd go around and make the bets, but he wouldn't send reports to us or anything. At Saul's wedding, he showed up with a big suitcase, and all the relatives went running to him thinking he's coming with a suitcase of money to show the results of his system and his betting. But the thing he told them was the system went broke. All the money was lost. And unfortunately, he died at a very early age of 35 when his heart problem could not be diagnosed properly and treated. Before I go on,
Go ahead.
I should say something about memory itself. As I said in one of my poems, the years escape us. And each year or each event is like a comet. It flashes in front of us, it's bright and clear, and that's what it is. But it's like a comet. It soon passes us by, leaving its long, long tail with little spots And when we're using memory, that's what we're going after. And that's a very tough thing to get at because it has all kinds of traps to it. Our ego is involved. We try to rationalize events so that they make sense. We try to protect all the emotions. We're really tourists in our memory. We're not really knowledgeable of them in the true sense. Again, I think I'll give my memory to the best of my knowledge, but the best of my knowledge includes my personality, my ego, and all the other factors that come into that. So we can continue, but just a qualifying idea of what memory is.